Okay, it seems that people are coming in. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tina Hovio, and I work as a program director in FFD, Food and Forest Development Finland, which is a Finnish NGO supporting farmers and forest producers in developing countries. We are pleased to be part of the global process related to Food Systems Summit that will have a culmination summit this week on Thursday. And we have been pondering how to support the transformative change that the food system should face so that it would be more sustainable, nature positive, and inclusive. This is part of the webinars that we are organizing this year. We had the first webinar in April that went through all the 5 themes of the Food System Summit. The nature positive production is one of them. And we wanted to focus more on this. So idea to get today is to discuss what does it really mean? How do we engage people in the nature positive production? And what we want to do is really to get people in the developing countries into this process. So the focus of this webinar is really to see what to do, how we support our partners in developing countries, how to get the transformation at the grassroots level. We have a program. If I could ask the organizers to put the program in the screen, please. So today's program starts with some generic presentations. We have a welcoming words by Ms. Agroecology, who is the Director for International Affairs at the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. Then we have a clarifying presentation by Juha Helenius, who is professor at the University of Helsinki, but also working as a research director at the Ruralia Institute. So he will give a short presentation on what is really meant by nature positive production. Then we have a pleasure to have a presentation by Mr. Samuel Tumbesige, who is a PhD fellow at the University of Leuven. And he will go through what this concept means, especially in developing countries. And I think this is rather interesting because he, together with his colleague, carried out the study for Fingo on seeing how the European Union's large programs, the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork, is seen from the African perspective. We have some possibilities of exchanging between us. And then we go into the group discussions. We have 4 groups, and the technical advisor, Matti Ketola, will divide us into the groups. One thing as concerning the groups is that we have now 4 topics. Could I have the 4 topics, please, on the screen? The first one is focusing on knowledge and extension, and how does it support the location-based nature positive production. The second group will focus on women's role. The third group is looking at service provision for advisory and training, but also on learning, development, and innovation capacity. And then the fourth group is looking for global value chains and actors like commerce and retailers, and how to deal with challenges and barriers linked to this. We have requested you to indicate the group that is your interest in when you did the registration. And if we take the groups, the division of the people, it seems that the group 4 is getting the most of interested people. Could I have this? Yes. In order to have more even distribution of people in the groups, could I ask you who are in the fourth group, if you could consider changing into another group. This is up to you. If you feel that you could change the group, we would like to ask you to put a message either directly to Matti Ketola or in the chat, so that when we do the division to the groups, we have a more even distribution. Thank you. But now I would like to start with the actual program. A couple of pragmatic issues before that. So, as you very nicely are doing so, keep your microphone off if you're not speaking. As well, the cameras are good to keep off, so we can focus on the key speakers. If you are connecting through a phone or mobile, so could you please put your name into the black screen which is presenting you, that in order to Matti to be able to put you into right group. If it says only iPhone, we don't know who you are and we are not able to put you to the small groups. And just as a final reminder, we would like to get concrete ideas, examples, and focus on the grassroots level in the developing countries. We know that there are a lot of global challenges, but this is really about practical actions taken in the grassroots level. But with this, I would once more welcome you to this webinar, and I would like to give the floor to Ms. Aulikki Hulmi to say the opening words. Please, Aulikki, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tina, and good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure for me to open this seminar or webinar. I think that we have learned a great practice during this process of preparing the food system summit, that we have had most interesting webinars and dialogues on a different level than we used to have earlier, and I'm sure that this is one of the practices that will also continue after the pandemics. But the theme today, nature positive production, I think this is really an excellent theme. I have to say that I only kind of get started to think about what is nature positive actually when we got this list of the action tracks of the Food System Summit, and actually this boost nature positive production was the action track which Finland was very interested, because we knew that we do have something to give on this sector, and we have innovations, we have practices which certainly would be useful for other countries to be shared. I just have to say that when I saw this concept, I was a bit also thinking that is this something new? We have heard about environmental friendly production, regenerative agriculture, agroecology, and as we commonly say in FAO, agroecology and other innovative solutions. And I'm afraid that in international organizations, we unfortunately have the tendency of politicizing different concepts, and that's not very useful use of time, that we kind of use the time for debating on what is the content of different concepts, and which one we should use and which one is somehow wrong. I think that it would be very good to have a more or less neutral term which we all understand and which covers all the very crucial issues which we have to deal with in the future. And I'm of course I'm curious to hear what our experts say about nature positive production, but I'm kind of optimistic that we could find this as a concept which we can really build on in the future. And of course, as Tina mentioned, it's really not about the terminology. It's really about action. We should find the ways really how to make the food systems more sustainable, and of course today we also discuss on how to support our partners in the global south to do that, because of course we have had our national food systems debate, but that's not enough. We all know that as long as we have hunger and malnutrition in world, this work is not completed, and we really, as the Secretary General of United Nations have kind of taken this initiative of Food System Summit to show that this is really our common task, and we have to work together. Multilateral cooperation is really essential in this question. So I think that we have to use the lessons learned in our country, and that's to share what we have learned about production which is positive for nature, and how to take care of the delicate balance of nature and food security. And one, I guess that one of those, as Tina mentioned, this fourth group is very, very popular, because I'm sure that all of us realize that our food systems, or also our national food systems, are very much connected to other food systems, and this, we really have to understand how this whole system works. So I'm curious to hear more, and I look forward to hearing new ideas and solutions. The next phase is really to put them into action. We have the World Food Day in October, and the theme to this year is "Our actions are our future." I think this is a very good start or reminder also for our webinar today. Thank you very much, and I wish us all a very inspiring webinar. Thank you, and over to Tina.
Thank you, Aulikki. And with a further notice, I'd like to ask Juha Helenius now to give us a reflection. What does it really mean, nature positive production? Please, Juha, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my first challenge is to try to share my screen. Just a second. That would be the one.
Yes,
okay.
It's there. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to introduce this concept. My background is in agroecology. I'm a professor in agroecology in University of Helsinki. Okay, what is meant by nature positive production? I would like to start by introducing the need. Why do we have so many concepts for sustainable production, ecologically, environmentally friendly production. There is a need to change the practices in food production. And this first slide, in this first slide, I share with you the Planetary Boundaries study, which refers, the Planetary Boundaries concept refers to those environmental changes that for which we, the scientific community has data enough to make the risk assessment. And the diagram shows three environmental concerns on which the risk has been assessed to exceed the planetary boundary, by which is the concept of which this planetary boundary refers to the ability of biosphere to support life. And these three are the flows of nitrogen, the flows of phosphorus, and what is called biosphere integrity, especially genetic diversity. And the dotted areas, the black dots, indicate what is the share of food production, global food production, to each of these. And as you can see, food production causes half or more of the environmental change in all these three areas which have been assessed as exceeding the planetary boundary and causing a threat to the integrity of the biosphere and life support systems. So there is a need to reconsider the methods of food production. And not just the methods, but I don't have time in this introduction to go to the food systems. The Food System Summit is timely, it's needed, because it is very far from possible to solve these, especially the small holder farmers in developing countries, but equally the farmers in developed countries. It is not possible to them by themselves to solve this. It needs a food system transformation, but I don't have time to go this, but let's hope that the Food System Summit comes to some positive outcomes concerning the transformation that is needed. Continuing to scientific background, Kate Raworth has presented already 10 years ago this nice conceptualization of where is the safe and just place for humanity. And this adds to the previous in introducing other dimensions of sustainability, not just environmental. And in this conceptualization, the environmental ceiling is seen as the outer critical boundary, which should not be exceeded, and then the inner boundary, social foundation. And it is in this between, it is in this donut that we should aim to in our sustainable development. And this is important to remember when thinking of the rather natural scientific goals in nature positive production, that we indeed have economic and social goals that must be consistently dealt with. And then the third of the scientific background, I would like to share with you this pancake model of sustainable development goals, which illustrates the fact that the biosphere provides the services for life support on which the social and economic goals depend. And this was in earlier days debated, and it was blamed as being deep green thinking, maintaining that we couldn't trade between the ecological goals and societal goals. But nowadays, I think most people agree, and our big environmental changes that we have experienced have shown that this ecological foundation of the living system is not tradable. It cannot be exchanged with social and economic goals, but instead the social and economic development should be built on sustainable relationship with the nature and human being. And these 4 goals, life on land, life below water, clean water and sanitation, climate action, as they are formulated in the Sustainable Development Goals, for this basis for the other goals. And then I would like to go on in this brief introduction to the concept. I choose to share with you the background paper by the scientific group for the FSS meeting, written by Hodgson and her colleagues. So how they describe nature positive production. Basically, the idea is to get from the net nature negative production to nature positive. The net nature negative refers, for example, to those global environmental issues that I shared with you in the first slide that are caused by food production or the food system. And reflecting Hodgson, this nature positive production refers to, or this is quite much in my own interpretation, but it asks for transformation, values and thinking, not just technology. There is no single technological or a kind of toolbox of technological silver bullets which would solve this issue, as already stated. It is not doable by farmers alone. And then I think this reflects this new thinking also, the emerging understanding away from the Cartesian dichotomy between nature and human being, towards conceptualizing human species as one species among the others in the nature that we are embedded in. There is this concept of one health, which refers to the inseparable linkage between human health and the health in the biosphere among the other organisms and ecosystems. And that is closely related to this thinking along the lines of nature positive production. This is also along the lines of more of adapting to the ecosystems, to the requirements, not just managing the ecosystems, which was the very Cartesian way of thinking that we with technology, we harness the natural resources for our benefit. And that has turned out to be a misunderstanding, because the ecosystems are ecologically integrated and run by communities of species, not just human species. And that comes, of course, to the equality of beings instead of the still currently dominating specism, which refers to human species as the most valuable species. Then, as Aulikki Hulmi already mentioned, there is this concept of regenerative agriculture, which also looks for its contents. It often refers to soils, but it can be seen as much more. It can be thought of including also regeneration of the skills and knowledges of the human capital, social capital in the rural areas among the farmers and so on. So it is also a concept that is still evolving, but it is basically the same idea of production, nature positive production, and maintaining and restoring the natural resources and ecological integrity of the ecosystems on which food production is dependent. And then there is this concept of agroecology, as already mentioned. Anybody who would like to look at that from the point of view of implementing certain principles could visit FAO's agroecology pages, where they 10 principles of agroecology are listed, and again they reflect very well what is the content of nature positive production. Then continuing along the lines of Hodgson, they first of all they refer to the International Union of Conservation of Nature's definition of nature positive production as from the point of view of actions to protect, to sustainably manage, and to restore natural and modified ecosystems. And then they go on in stating that the nature positive production should be thought of on 4 pillars: to protect natural systems from new conversions for not just food production, but this, of course, this nature positive production should refer to all use of ecosystems, not just food. To sustainably manage existing food production systems, to restore and rehabilitate degraded systems for sustainable production, and ecosystem services. Again, ecosystem services is a concept which is related to this. And then the 4th pillar, as save and set aside some land back to nature, so to say, so to speak. And then they define this also along the lines, not just along the lines of the needs or principles, but they call for actions for nature positive production. And I briefly summarize this. These are 8 groups of action which they call for, the scientific group for the Food System Summit. And governance at landscape level, from farm to work. There's a little bit of what I have added in a way in interpreting this, which I think it's okay to do. So any of us can contribute to this thinking. So the governance is not just at farm level, but it is across the landscape, over regions, and also global governance for food systems. Manage soil sustainably, understand soils as ecosystems, as communities of organisms, and as ecosystems driving carbon and nitrogen and plant nutrient cycles, which is very important link to circular economy and recycling. Develop knowledge. Yes?
Could you please shorten a bit?
Yeah, I can. Okay, I don't need to read these all loud. I think this was it. You can also, these links, these blue ones are links, and you are free to use these slides. So yeah, the rest are develop knowledge among food chain actors, develop smart technologies, act towards sustainable nutrition and diets, rural empowerment, improve access to natural resources for women, and promote processing facilities and marketing. These are easy said, difficult to achieve, but I hope that the Food System Summit can help in this. These are all very practical also. They are not politically ambitious, which we can understand that the summit cannot be politically very radical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johan. Sorry to have interrupted. But I think it's interesting that in this concept, you talk about both nature, but you have the social dimension. So it's about the equality and having possibility for all to be engaged. But now I'd like to ask Samuel to give his reflection and share his thoughts with us. Samuel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Professor. Good morning once again to you all. Great. Good morning to you once again to you all. My name is Samuel Tumwesje, and my background is in agriculture and rural development. As Tina mentioned before, I was together with my colleague. We were asked by Fingo to look into the EU Green Deal Farm to Fork strategy and what it means to Africa's and other developing countries' climate agenda and food sovereignty. So my presentation today will be benchmarking that work that we did, and I will also share my experience in relation to developing countries, particularly East Africa, how nature positive production is approached. Okay, my presentation will just touch on 4 basic themes. One would just be building on what Professor Huya Herenius took us through, unpacking what nature positive production is. Then I would try to pitch and identify opportunities that are mentioned in the Farm to Fork strategy that we can build on, and highlight what are the policy and practice coherence and incoherences that is mentioned in the Farm to Fork strategy, but also what is being done in the developing countries with reference of East Africa, and what are the opportunities thereof that we can base on to give support and advocate. Professor mentioned very well that food production already, the forces from production already are causing environmental changes. And today, amidst the changing climate, of course, those forces have led to changing climate. But again, the changing climate is affecting food production. And also in the context that the population is increasing, and there will be continuous increase in demand for food, and not only food, but healthy food in terms of safety and nutrition. And yet we have to balance that with production and consumption systems that protect, manage, and restore nature and conserve ecosystems. So how do we do that? And as Professor rightly put it, nature-based or nature-positive production gives us one pathway of transforming our production systems towards regenerative. There is a talk somewhere of we need a new green revolution, but this new green revolution should be producing more from less, but producing in a greener way. So I think it's the same thinking that was at the back of the framers of Farm to Fork strategy and the EU Green Deal, recognizing that the current models of agriculture and food production are unsustainable. Of course, in relation to equity in livelihood opportunities, farmers across all scales, including small-scale farmers in developing countries that export food, specifically to Europe or EU. Also in advancement of health, not only human health, but health of the ecosystem and health of other species on land and below land, and also environmental integrity. So with that recognition, yes, in the Farm to Fork strategy, they clearly state that there is a need to transform our food systems, production, distribution, and consumption. But today I will focus on production. transform the way we do it towards fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly approach. And a few focus areas which are mentioned in there. We need to invest in green and regenerative technologies, build green alliances and ecosystems, promote approaches like agroecology, organic agriculture production, climate smart, that would help to build the themes of fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly food production, reducing on deforestation, enhanced carbon sequestration, that's linked with mitigation of climate change, and of course, focusing on regenerative economy or recycling, reducing food losses, and waste management. So these are recognized in the Farm to Fork strategy, which cuts across all the EU, I think including Finland will be picking from this, and it's a good start. However, how do we pitch that together with what is being done in the Global South with reference of East Africa, or how does it speak to the developing countries? One area of coherence is that across all spaces, there is consensus and focus that yes, we need to undertake low carbon development pathway and build climate resilient greener economies. All the spaces recognize that. However, the how is a little bit of challenging, and I would like to point out a few incoherences which the farm stock strategy points out, which I think probably will be pitched by most of the EU countries, and what is being reflected on in the Global South. This could give us a kind of information that when we are discussing on how we can support to know what's taking place. For example, the Farm to Fork strategy points out the challenge of agrochemical use, and the focus is to reduce it. And yet in East Africa specifically, the discussion is on how do we intensify agricultural production to increase food production, food access, of course also nutritive food, to tackle the issue of food and nutrition insecurity, given the location of most of the countries in the tropics, of course, with issues of pests and tropical pests and diseases. And the focus is not really to reduce agrochemical use, yes, to use agrochemicals in a friendly way, but use them to intensify food production. So that's one area of incoherence. And of course, all this comes with support around it in terms of policy, price incentives, not so much of subsidies in the Global South, but price incentives. Also, one other area that Farm to Fork strategy talks about, which fits in where the concept of nature positive production is an area to do with forestry and forestry products. Farm to Fork strategy is very clear that goods which will be entering in the EU going forward should be free of deforestation and associated human rights violation. However, there's this challenge in the Global South where we have huge communities which are in communal lands closer to gazetted areas, natural forests and tropical forests, and they have been there for ages. Some of them are indigenous. So how will the livelihoods of those communities which are depending on natural forests and forests be looked at? Will they be left behind? Will there be equity? So that's one area of incoherence. Another area is the Farm to Fork strategy doesn't speak so much about women and youth involvement in agribusiness. Of course, I know it's an overarching document, implementation guidelines and other strategies will stem from it, but yeah, it's a little bit silent. though in the Global South, the focus is on rural transformation, which also, of course, doesn't currently close all the gender gaps, but putting gender equality and social inclusion at the core. Issues of sustainable consumption. The EU talks about reduction of red meat and focusing on healthier diets, fruits and vegetables, while in East Africa particularly, the focus for the issues of food security and nutrition and of course livelihoods. Also the focus is on increasing more animal protein or animal protein intake. Issues of food loss, yes, EU is very clear that should be linked to circular economy in East Africa. Food loss and reducing food waste, especially at production level, is something which is not talked about. So discuss a picture of where in Europe or what Finland might be positioning or guided from the Farm to Fork strategy and what is happening in the Global South, particularly in East Africa. And of course, amidst this and interpretation of the Farm to Fork strategy and its implementation, there are anticipated risks. I'm not saying they are current, but whereby people whom we interviewed in the East Africa region thought that this could be risks or negative impacts that might come around. One of them is externalization of polluting technologies. The question is, as EU moves climate neutral, where will the old technologies go? Will they be offloaded in the developing countries as a foreign direct investment? It's a question to ask and probably build advocacy around. As more rules and stringent procedures are enforced, especially to access the European market for organic products and products which meet given certification and standard levels related to deforestation and all that. What will happen? Will the Global South open up to other countries like China and results into unwelcome FDI? And this is a trend that we have started seeing a lot of Chinese-led big farms opening up in the Global South, even in Uganda, where I come from. And will this exacerbate land grabbing? Will it be supplementing production? What will it mean? So we will one continent, yes, focus on going green and climate neutrality, and then while the practices are not felt globally. And of course, the understanding that the implementation of the Green Deal, specifically Farm to Fork strategy, is expensive, requires quite a lot of money. So the question is, what will be left for development cooperation, especially for East Africa, will the support continue coming? Having said that, however, in the Global South, specifically in East Africa, there are opportunities that can be built on, even as Farm to Fork strategy is rolled out, or as a way of promoting nature positive production. I have to mention that most of the countries have prioritized agroecology, climate smart agriculture, organic farming at policy and practice. My practice has also been in climate change adaptation, and most of the countries, when you read their NAP, National Adaptation Plans, and specifically for agriculture and land use sectors, also their NDCs, you see they are focusing into production approaches that green the production systems. And that is a good entry point. How can it be carried up? How can it be scaled up? Of course, the increasing demand of organic products in the EU will better position most farmers in the Global South. I have to mention that particularly like in East African region, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, most farmers are closer to organic farming. only that they lack certification, but the major point is that they produce with less agrochemicals. They embrace all the concepts of organic farming. So there will be an opportunity for them to enter and produce for the European market. Yeah, I recognize I have 3 minutes remaining. Yes, I would have made a good summary. Yes, and also to mention that the Global South, we still have a large pool of young entrepreneurs, youth, men and women, of course, who need support, but there's a good pool of labor and agropreneurs to be involved in nature positive production. And most of the countries are prioritizing doing land use planning and zoning out ecosystems which are fragile, understanding the interlinkages, and that would be an opportunity to support. What are the prevailing challenges? Yes, the prevailing challenges, as I mentioned, is, yes, the focus for most governments is to improve food security and nutrition, and therefore conventional production systems are the mainly supported. And of course, some of them spill into marginal lands because intensification is not well embraced. So there is expansion into forestry or conserved areas. So those are the challenges that need to be looked into, or how best we can support regenerative production systems. Also to mention that the green technologies and skills development is a challenge. Of course, availability, affordability, management skills, but also systems through which producers can be empowered, such as extension systems. Yes, most of them do not reach the communities, or those which reach the communities are not effective because of the structural issues and the functional issues, facilitation and access. Also, a huge challenge is that farmers are not institutionalized. Farmers are not well organized into farming groups or cooperatives, and it would be an issue. And those are the areas where we can have entry points for action. Quite issues to do with undifferentiated value chains. You find a farmer is doing everything from production up to marketing. Yes, if we are to go regenerative agriculture production, there's quite a lot to do with organic inputs. For example, the markets are not in place and not well facilitated. So these challenges highlight what could be the entry points if we are to give support and advocacy below policy, but mostly on practice. Of course, I talked about agrochemical use. Its regulation is not in place. No harmonized protocols across the region. Institutional capacities and infrastructures are lacking. And also to mention that the investment fund for the transition into green production isn't much. Issues of access to credit, especially for women and the youth, is still a big challenge. Therefore, what would be the entry points? Yes, for advocacy and support, one would be supporting the functional public and private mechanisms for producers to transit. Look at how investments funds could be accessed, or how credit and financial services could reach even the most vulnerable people, the youth, the women, and the poor smallholder farmers. Issues to do with market access and standards. Specifically within Farm to Fork strategy, if we are to go for green alliances and eco schemes, and advocacy could be around how inclusive are they, how just they are, how equitable partnerships are built, how our women and youth are brought on board. Of course, the anticipated land grabbing issues also could be an issue of advocacy and the externalization of pollution technology. Having said that, thanks so much for listening to me. And over to you, Tina. I think I used 2 of your minutes, but forgive me for that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Samuel, and thank you for making an effort to keep it short. This is interesting, and before going to the group discussions, I have one question myself and one question from Olavi Luukkanen. One that Olavi Luukkanen would want to ask is, what is the future role of livestock for food security and food systems in Africa? My question is more like, entry points for advocacy and support sound very familiar with those that have been proposed already for decades in agricultural development. So what would be different from the earlier recipes? I don't know, should I ask Samuel first to reflect on this?
Great. That's an interesting question. I don't think I will have like a direct answer which covers everywhere, but I would say, to me, yes, livestock still plays a big role for food security, but also for livelihoods. And the problem, I would say, for countries which I have experience of, for example, Uganda or Kenya, the problem is per se not, the problem is how livestock is produced, how livestock production is carried out. Are we embracing greener practices? How is it being done? Is communal grazing a challenge to conservation of ecosystems? So to me, I think the future would be, how can we make the production system greener? How can we introduce practices that enhance conservation of ecosystems, that enhance green production, reduce the contribution to greenhouse gases, does not degrade the environment? Because if you look at, let's say, livestock consumption per capita, the numbers are still very low. Of course, it would be good to have a shift from consumption of meat and dairy products to more healthier and greener products, agricultural products, fruits and vegetables. But on the other hand, the level or the scale of consumption is not that much. So to me, it's a system which can still be supported, but can be supported in the limits of making it greener and making it sustainable.
Thank you, Samuel. I don't know, Juha, if you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I can comment both questions. First of all, I was also a bit concerned when seeing the scientific group's action plan or action proposal for nature positive production, because as you, Tina, noted, it is what we have seen over decades already, and it has been rephrased maybe, but most of it is something that has been discussed and known. The real challenge is to this challenge of transforming the food system and finding a new global food order, which is really needed. I don't think that things will go to better direction led by the ever increasing, ever more concentrated globalizing agribusiness. So yeah, I think it's a huge challenge. We really don't need any more listings of the sustainable practices if the implementation is not possible. About the livestock, in the world we have 1.4 billion hectares of arable land, instead 3 billion hectares of permanent grassland, and there is definitely a role also for ruminants in sustainable food production, using these lands, much of which are not possible to use in arable crop production, or most are not possible. The problems are both in the extensive farming in developing countries where overgrazing is common, and the issue is very complicated. We don't have time at all to go to that here. And then also the very intensive production in the developed countries. And then one of the problems here is that the general opinion in developed countries is kind of turning against livestock production because of climate reasons and so on. And at the same time, it is the very same small proportion of the world population who is over-consuming livestock products at cost of their own health, instead of, as Samuel already referred to, in most developing countries, there is space in the diets for increasing animal products in order to achieve, for example, protein needs. So, yeah.
Yes. These are good reflections, but I think that we are already consuming the time reserved for the group discussions. I would now propose that we go to the groups. Let's try to keep the timing and end as planned in, was it 10:45? And then at 11, we would like to come back and present the discussion results. So let's keep the discussion at the very concrete level. Let's try to think really what should be done differently, why the earlier recipes didn't work. And there will be a Jamboard. And Kirsi is now sharing in the chat the linkages to the Jamboard, and that will help the participants of the small group members to share their thoughts. So we're looking for concrete ideas for the presentation. Keep them short. Try to find 4 ideas of something which you know it's working, or something you think that we should introduce as new ideas. We'll convene back at 11 so that the groups can share their thoughts and views. And finally, we have the closing remarks at the end, and we close at 11:45. So I would like to ask Matti now to share us into the different groups. Okay, I hope that you had a fruitful discussion in the small group and that you are back into the plenary session. I wonder if the groups are now ready to present the ideas and results of their discussion. I might try a traditional way of approaching this, and I would like to ask if Group 1 would like to proceed and present the result of the discussion.
Yes, we are ready. Yes, I would like to share my screen. Let's see if I manage to do this.
Looking good.
Okay, great.
Yes. Okay. Hello. Good. Yes. Good to see you all. Nice to be here. My name is Heidi Siivonen, and I was the facilitator of this first group. I'm from MTK, the Finnish Farmers Organization, and together with Carolina, we made you a few lines about our discuss. It was a great small group, and our topic was that who should provide knowledge and extension on location-based nature-positive production mechanism. And first of all, we dealt this with few topics. smaller topics. And the first question was, how should this be done? And altogether, summary is we need to engage all different actors, multi-actors, community, private organizations, financial institutions, and extension services, and of course, the farmers. A holistic view is needed. The points we discuss about is the land use, together agriculture and forestry, and maybe there is also a need for a new paradigm based on agroecology. And it's not that we, of course, we are looking at this moment and the next harvesting season, but we need to have a future-oriented and sustainable thinking. And also, it's needed to emphasize on cultural and social values. And one thing is identify locally the most important practices and focus on those one. And also, when this is done, understand the systemic, not only the practices, but move to systematic understanding.
And then we listed these very important institutions which should be involved in this multi-actor communication. And National Agricultural Research Institutes were mentioned as a very important organizations, as they have this dialogue between research and policymakers, also private investors and other local relevant actors. Also, universities, of course, are part of this research institutes were mentioned. Then FAO and donor communities, farmer organizations and extension services are critical for this communication. Then we asked about the good examples the group members have from their own work regarding this knowledge exchange and in extension. And we heard about farmer field schools, which are really powerful way to for farmers for learning by doing. One weakness is that even though there are very many examples of these farmer field schools, not so much results are available for other people who are interested about these practices. But now this has been acknowledged, and it's important to report about these success stories also for others who are interested. So these participatory exercises, demonstration plots, and this kind of forerunners or pilot farms are important ways to spread good practices and knowledge. What was also mentioned was that it's important to have some life after the project has ended, to maintain these good practices, so that also after the project has ended, these good technologies and practices and ways of doing, they stay alive.
Thank you, Group 1. I see that there is a question from Samuel for you. Please go ahead.
Well, not a question about the contribution. Thanks so much, Group 1. I just wanted to add that I like the point of holistic view, but if I'm to borrow from the work I'm doing, I think it also needs to kind of benchmark system thinking approach in a way that if you focus on a landscape, then it is transformation of a given landscape. If you focus on on an ecosystem. It is transformation of an ecosystem, not just one element of that. And from practice, my experience has shown that shifts which are based on livelihoods, if it's agroecology and you link it with livelihood of people, they can easily be transformational and adopted. Then for the institutions, probably one more piece that can be added could be other private sector actors. For example, you could be promoting production of coffee using the agroecology approach. You would need value chain players, which are outside these institutions, who are from private sector main players, to provide marketing and provide financing and all that. That's what I thought I would add. Thanks.
Thank you, Samuel. Do we have any remarks from the rest of the participants of the groups, or any other questions from the audience? If not,
I would just like to make one point about these farmer research networks, which I talked about in the group, but didn't come out strongly in the response there. I see them at the bottom of the slide, but this is, I think, a distinctly new approach. So building on farmer field skills, building on many years of experience with participatory work, but they seem to have pulled some of these together in a way which is proving quite powerful and providing some sort of longevity beyond project cycles. And I gave a link to a paper there in the chat which summarizes current learning about farmer research networks.
Thank you, Rick. And yes, it can be seen in the chat, and I think all the participants can have a link. And it was really emphasized, we need systemic thinking, we need participation of the practitioners with the other actors, and we need to think with the longer term perspective and not get entangled by a project cycle and short-term approaches. Thank you, Group 1. I'd like to ask now the Group 2 to make the presentation, please.
Yes, hello. Our team was a very small and efficient team of three ladies. And the question to tackle was how are we going to strengthen women's role in the development of nature-positive production methods? We were from FFD and Siemenpool Foundation. And maybe the key points would be that first we realized that to actually answer this question, we would need to conduct a gender analysis to know what the reality is, which often we don't know so well. We were, for example, discussing the fact how in many countries or many communities there's a division of labor between cultivating cash crops and food for own consumption, and the division might be that men are responsible for the cash crops and women for the food of the family. But we concluded that we need more information about what the context is, and then we discussed that one way to increase women's role would be to support the organization of women and the empowerment of women, as well as activities especially directed at women. And in some activities, sometimes it could mean quota for women's participation, but then the quota is not enough, but it should also be taken into consideration in the organizing of the activities. For example, when it comes to women's daily schedules and these kind of things, to actually make possible their participation, and they should be encouraged to share their views and participate in trainings and other situations. And then when it comes to actors who should be involved, we discussed the twinning approach. For example, if you think about Finnish actors and actors in the south, it could be twinning of women's rural women's organizations in Finland and women's organizations or female farmers organizations in the south, and other women's organizations in the global south, and the farmers organizations, as well as local and provincial authorities, to make it visible what the women farmers are doing. Maybe this is all I have. My colleagues can complement.
Do we have any complimentary comments or questions from the audience? It seems not, but it was very, very thoughtful and it seems rather comprehensive. And yes, we do need to understand the women's role and what they're doing in the society and in the production to be able to support them. I would like to ask now the group 3 to present.
Thank you, Tina. So I try to share the screen. Too many windows open. Okay, there. So we discussed almost until the end. So I tried to summarize as well as possible all the points of view. So there was one point which was in national level that in order to change the mindset of the research and many important actors like extension services, you change in national policies. And there was mentioned, for example, already drafted national pathways towards this sort of development in the agricultural production development. What is the second point, what is important is that we form farmer groups, that they associate somehow, because that allows the knowledge transfer from farmer to farmer, but also allows the cooperation with others. Being the private sector or extension services, etc., and also speak up your own mind. And that enables the inclusion in different kind of processes. And we discussed in the end also a bit about the individual empowerment, which means that that you need to change the mindset just in order to be ready to see that I can change. It is possible. I know I can learn new things, and that can be sometimes a trigger. And later points we will have very concrete issues how to do this. The third point was that in order to promote the new ideas, new kind of problem solving, there needs to be a cooperation between farmers. So farmers in farmer inclusion important with the researchers, extension services, and private sector when relevant. And one tool for this is, for example, innovation platforms. So this is a possible tool to make context-specific problem solving, and also have like shared piloting farms to show that new ideas actually work, so that the farmers think that it's worth taking the risk, and the risk is not too big to take to change something in their production. Then we also talked about the north-south knowledge in this cooperation. If there are, for example, a Finnish research institution involved in an innovation platform, to
to also consider the indigenous knowledge and solutions and context-specific solutions that actually exist in the South as well. So don't just start thinking about that the North has solutions and South will take them on board, but who has the capacity and who has the knowledge of the cooperation is important. Then linked to these new ideas, innovation platforms, different kind of cooperation is the support and capacitation of extension service system. And one challenge is that there is shortage of public funding, so more public funds are needed. And one highlight here was that the extension service system, it has to work in partnership with farmers. This is linked to the previous bullet, so, and also for the national policies. So what the extension service discuss with the farmers, it relates also what they know and what kind of new solutions they know that exist and actually work in this context. And then one extra point, which we found important, that there need to be some investment buffers that the farmer alone doesn't need to make the change costs for the new technology, for the new kind of seeds, for new kind of equipment that they need. So I don't know if the group has something to add, that I missed something important because we didn't have time to go through this all together.
Yes, one comment.
Yes,
Olavi Luukkanen. Extension, yes, we discussed it, but I also would like to emphasize that extension must be coordinated so that we don't have separate agriculture extension and forestry extension. In the field of agroforestry, there's a potential conflict whose extension counts, but it must be coordinated.
Good, thank you. And this came up also in the first group, that we should think of land use as a whole and not separated as a forestry and agriculture, because for farmers, they deal with both of them. And it would be beneficial also for more resilient landscape planning and management if these are seen together. Any questions or comments from the audience? If not, I thank the group 3, that was very rich. And I would like to ask for the group 4 to take the floor.
Thank you very much. And I ask kindly Hanna to share our Jamboard. And please, Tiina, shout immediately if you can't hear my voice. There seems to be a problem with my mic, and that's the reason why I want to stop the video. So maybe it's the connection that has a problem, but please say immediately if you can't hear my voice or if it comes somehow unclear.
Yeah, it's somehow fluctuating, but let's try.
Yes, okay. I stopped the video. So we discussed about the nature positive production and how it can be better supported in global value chains, what kind of challenges and barriers we see, and are there any solutions how to actually overcome these. There seems to be kind of the topic of long food chain and how to share and how to get the data and information, and especially then when we think about this between the farmer and also the consumer at the end who is buying then the product. So what can be done there? And one thing that what we kind of also saw is that we need the tools to share the production information to the consumers. So definitely the handling and management of the data is one of the topics that we need to overcome. Of course, then the institution and funding, so the lack of reliable controls and the control standards that are needed is one topic, and then the political will also. And then we discussed a bit also about the agrochemical use and how we could reduce that and what are then the government policies in developing countries, and especially when it comes to agrochemical use. Of course, the mindset and the attitude is one area. So how the producers, what is their mindset, how they think, and what they think about, for example, increasing the inputs and the direct increase in production. So how they are connected, or are they well connected or not? And what is then the connection between this? And of course, we all along the chain need to have a nature positive attitude in a way. So it's not only one party in the chain, but we all need to have the same view. And this comes then to the shared commitment of the whole food system, what the nature positive means and what we need to do. We also discussed about the involvement of the youth and the women. And there we also recognize that women are part, of course, the work there, but what is then the level where they are working, and how could we improve and empower women even more? And that they have a role, and they are the great players in the nature positive production. And then we discussed, of course, also the price issue and kind of the valuation of the food. So the challenge is, of course, in the big corporation, and there is then the market price, and what is then the market price for that? So that's definitely a topic that needs to be discussed. But if we then jump to the other question that we had, what institutions should be involved? And there we saw that the certification organizations, the farmer organizations, the farmer unions, consumer unions, financial institutions, the research, of course, there, the education institution, and also in different levels. And then we discussed also the role of the private sector and the companies, and the connection between that and then the regulators. So is it always needed that things need to be regulated? Does there need to be a law or some kind of a rule that is saying what needs to be done? Or can there be that the private sector is taking the steps forward and being then the front runner before the regulation comes to the table, so to say? So that was one of the topics also. And then we kind of highlighted on the pink note, the WTO and the trade rules that has a huge impact, but that we seem to all conclude that it's a very, very difficult question. But this was our input, and maybe then please feel free, dear colleagues from the group, to have your view if there was something else that you wanted to highlight. But thank you from my side.
Thank you, Nina, and I know that you had a very rich discussion. Do the other members of the group have anything to add or to clarify? Or any other questions from the rest of the audience? Samuel, please.
Yes, I would like to add something on agrochemical use, just to share in knowledge that we got when we are interviewing most people in East African countries for the Fingo report, that yes, agrochemical use regulation and use is quite a big issue at country and national level, but also across the region. And even in East Africa and AU, it is something of focus that there should be harmonized protocols, harmonized regulation, having structures in place on how access, distribution, and use is managed. So probably if support or advocacy is pointing towards that, then it needs to be taken beyond national scale, probably maybe look at also at the regional scale and see how protocols can be harmonized and structures which are similar be put in place for specific regions of the Global South.
Okay, thank you. we noted when regrouping people to the small groups, we noted that this was the topic which had the most of the attention. Also, the role of the private sector, the retail chains, etc., has been heavily discussed, for example, in the EU, when thinking about what is needed to better regulate or support responsible trade with the South, the zero deforestation value chains, etc. So this is kind of a topic that we thought would require still more reflection. And I'm glad to say that in November, we will have another webinar that will focus more on this topic, and especially on certification and other systems to promote transformative change. And we'll send you more information on that at the later stage. I thank Group 4. I think that all the groups had very good thoughts. It really created good debate, but also came up with the concrete examples. So I think it was a very positive experience. I thank all the participants. And now I would like to ask Mr. Juha Ruipo, who is the chair of Fingo's Food Security Group, to say some closing remarks. Please, Juha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you all for the very good discussion and a very deep discussion in different points of the agenda. And I must say that it was a good starting point to hear, first of all, Aulikki's and Juha's and Samuel's keynote ideas there, that what is the background there, what is the next steps, what has been already noted, and some discussions around what is the sustainable animal husbandry and what should we have as the key points there. But altogether, going a little bit deeper there, it is something what I have learned today is that everything is starting from the local possibilities, and we must always think that what is the practices there, what is the economical possibilities there, and how it is possible for them in those them as a farmer or forest owner to adapt to the new situation where there's trade issues, there's climate issues, there's resilience issues, there's different kind of political and all kind of stresses for resilience point of view. And key issue is there that we have a research and extension services for the innovation, so that the innovation is not innovation if it's not implemented in grassroots level. And that is, I think, the key issue, that we must have those tools how to implement also, and that was also in a Group 1, the participatory exercises. We need them to have that systemic change there in the thinking. And should I say, the basic issue for the nature positive production is that we have a know-how, and then we go to the further on to have the biodiversity positive issues there in production. But to come to the end is that how to change the mindset and how to have funding for that. It is something that we should find tools to overcome the issue that we are positive on the issue that there should be on market those kind of products which are nature positive. And then we are very fund of different kind of climate funding tools, but then how to connect that to the real life of the local farmers and rural women which are taking a huge part of the task in that food chain. That is perhaps one of those things what the group was thinking, that what makes it possible, the participation of women in the process. And then, of course, innovation platforms, we must have that kind of funding system which make it reality. And that was from my point of view, one of those most interesting points in the discussion. And as a conclusion, what Tina mentioned, that the next step is then to have that in reality, what on certification and different kind of tools which helps consumer to know what is there, what is the behind the products, how the production chain is the chain is working. That is also an important task, and a little bit different kind of discussion. And hopefully on November we have more to say about that, and especially what is happening with the trade rules and those kind of things. But altogether, thank you all for the participation of this event, and I'm totally sure that Tina and others are taking note of what has been discussed, and then to go further on the discussion. It is not just that we are talking about this nature positive, but as Timo Heikkilä was mentioned, that the soil is one of those key issues for all the production what we have and all the productivity possibilities what we have. Thank you all.
Thank you, Juha. We know that we're facing a formidable challenge to transform our way of living, using natural resources, respect more the planetary boundaries, and to provide wealth and decent livelihoods to all the people. This is what we are striving for, and we continue the work. I thank all the participants, especially the facilitators and the reporters of the groups. I noted that the Jamboard provides us a good material to make a short summary report on this. And in November, we'll come back focusing more on this relationship between the people, consumers and producers, and how it could be controlled, for example, using the certifications. I'm glad to close the event a little bit earlier. That we were a bit worried about the timing, but you were very efficient. So thank you all for this day.